So the four saints I'm going to go over today are Saint Valentine, Saint Maria Goretti, Saint Rose of Lima, and Saint Lorenzo Ruiz. So my first saint is Saint Valentine. He was a Catholic priest in the 3rd century who married couples together under the Catholic Church when it was deemed illegal. He united them together. His feast day is on February 14th on St. Valentine's Day, which is what it's named after, obviously. When he was caught for marrying couples together, he was imprisoned, but his imprisoner saw how humble St. Valentine's was and was impressed, and he asked St. Valentine to help his daughter Julia. And before St. Valentine died, he wrote Julia a note, which is where the terms of Valentine's comes from. My second saint is Saint Rose of Lima, who is known for her extreme beauty. She attempted many times to get rid of her beauty to keep the men away, and she took a vow of virginity and committed herself to charity. My third saint is Saint Lorenzo Ruiz. He was accused of murder, and so he needed to flee his country. And when he did, he ended up in Japan, where they persecuted Catholics. He was arrested and tortured until he recanted his faith, which he never ended up doing, and so he died a martyr after being tortured for many hours. The last saint who I'll be going over today and who I will delve into is Saint Maria Goretti. She was born on October 16th, 1890 in Coronado, Italy. Her father, who was a farm worker, moved his family to Feria di Conca, Italy, where he eventually died of malaria. So the care of all her children was left solely with Maria's mother. All of Maria's siblings and her mother worked in the fields as farmers, while Maria sewed, cooked, cleaned, and looked after her little sister, Teresa. The family's difficulties, despite them being complicated, did not stop them from celebrating their faith, and they were extremely close to God and their faith. One day on July 5th, 1902, at the age of 12, Maria was sitting outside on the steps of her home sewing when her 18-year-old brother, Alessandro, surprised and grabbed St. Maria from the back. He tried to rape her repeatedly, and instead of fighting him because of hate, she fought him for love. She cried many times that it was a mortal sin and that he was committing and that he would go to hell if he did not stop. He kept persisting, and when she kept denying and mentioning the Lord, Alessandro started to choke her, and when she said she would rather die than let him commit a mortal sin, he got so angry upon hearing this and stabbed her 11 times. She attempted to reach the door, and he stabbed her 3 more times after her escape attempt, and then he fled. Maria was found by her family when they arrived home, bleeding, and was rushed to the nearest hospital for surgery. Doctors could not save her as her wounds were too severe. Her surgeon told Maria, "Think of me in paradise," which she answered, debating on what depends who arrives there, saying it depends on either me or you who gets there first. And she didn't know how critical her conditions were and how she was literally about to die. So he told her, you, and he said, "You, Maria." And then she became aware of the fact that she was about to die because of her wounds. And she told him that, "I will gladly think of you when she arrives in heaven." The next day, Maria forgave Alessandro, and she passed away looking at an image of Mary while holding a cross to her chest. Alessandro was caught and sentenced 30 years in prison, remaining unrepentant and did not think his actions were as consequential as they were. While he was asleep in prison, he had a dream that Maria in a garden gave him lilies which burned in his hands, and then he awoke and realized how his actions were and how bad he was being. And so he decided then and there to change his ways, and he repented and followed the faith. Saint Maria was deemed a martyr as she fought against Alessandro's attempts at sexual sin. The most important aspect of her life was how she forgave her attacker out of the extreme concern for his whereabouts after death. Her forgiveness produced a miracle and evolved his life completely, turning his ways of thinking completely around. Saint Maria represents all youth and young women and their purity, as she is the patron saint of purity and victims of rape, and she is the youngest canonized saint in the church ever. She is an example to all of us, even as we are severely harmed, or even as she was severely harmed and killed, yet she still forgave her attacker. Yet most of us today continue to get angry over the littlest things, but even when she was stabbed 14 times, she still forgave Alessandro out of the pure love in her heart. So those are my saints. That's my saint projects.